listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in Exodus 37. Bezalel makes the ark, table, lampstand, and altar. In Exodus 37, we read about measurements and materials and repeated phrases that harken back to some of the earlier instructions we've seen in this book. But when we take a closer look, this chapter reveals something deeply relational about God. It shows us a God who wants to dwell among his people and who carefully provides a way for that relationship to exist. This chapter focuses on four sacred furnishings made by Bezalel: the Ark of the Covenant, the table of the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense. Each piece was built exactly as the Lord commanded, and each one points us forward to Jesus. The chapter begins with the ark. We see in verse 1, Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half was its length, a cubit and a half its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. The ark was the most sacred object in the tabernacle. It represented the throne of God among Israel. Inside it were the tablets of the covenant, the written law that revealed God's holy character. The ark reminds us that God is both near and holy. He chooses to dwell among his people, but he doesn't lower his standards to do so. The ark was overlaid with pure gold. It was set apart. It was handled with reverence. This points us toward Jesus, who perfectly embodied God's holiness while living among us. John tells us in John chapter 1, verse 14, a scripture I've quoted many times recently, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus didn't just visit humanity, he took on human flesh while remaining fully holy. Now, on top of the ark sat the mercy seat. Verse 6 says, "And he made a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half was its length, and a cubit and a half its breadth." The mercy seat was a lid. It was a covering on the Ark of the Covenant. This was the place where blood was sprinkled on the Day of Atonement, symbolizing forgiveness and reconciliation. God's law was inside the ark, but mercy covered it. God knew his people would fail to keep the law. The mercy seat declared that forgiveness wasn't an afterthought. It was central to God's design. Well, this points clearly to Jesus, whom Paul describes as the one God put forward as, quote, a propitiation by his blood. We see that in Romans 3:25. Jesus is our true mercy seat. Through his sacrifice, mercy covers the law that we have broken. Next, Exodus 37 describes the table of the bread of the presence. We see in verse 10, he also made the table of acacia wood. 2 cubits was its length, a cubit its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. This table held 12 loaves, representing the 12 tribes of Israel continually before the Lord. This table was about provision and fellowship. God wasn't distant from the daily needs of his people. He invited them into ongoing relationship, symbolized by shared bread. Well, that theme finds its fulfillment in Jesus, who, in John 6:35 said, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger." Now, Jesus doesn't just give bread. He is the bread. He sustains our lives spiritually, and he invites us into fellowship with the Father through himself. Now, the next section of the chapter describes the golden lampstand. We see in verse 17, he made the lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand, its shaft and its branches, its cups, its calyxes, and its flowers were of one piece with it. The lampstand was hammered from a single piece of gold and gave light inside the tabernacle. Light was essential. Without it, the priests couldn't serve. The lampstand reminds us that God doesn't leave his people to stumble in darkness. He provides illumination so they can walk in his presence. Again, this points directly to Jesus, who declared, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." We read that in John chapter 8, verse 12. Christ doesn't merely show the way, he is the light, and he makes life with God possible. There's also something important in how this chapter reads. Bezalel follows God's instructions precisely. The repeated faithfulness shows that obedience absolutely matters. God's presence wasn't accessed casually or creatively. It was approached on God's terms. I think that truth should humble us, but it also prepares us for grace. Where Israel needed priests and sacrifices and sacred furnishings, we now have Jesus, and he fulfills every requirement that's listed here. He fulfills it all on our behalf. Exodus 37 reminds us that God desires to dwell with his people, to forgive them, to sustain them, and to guide them. And all of that is fulfilled perfectly in Jesus. He is our holy presence, our mercy seat, our bread, and our light. And when we read this chapter, we aren't just learning about ancient furniture. We're being reminded that God has always been working toward relationship with his people. Through Jesus, that relationship is no longer behind a veil. It's open, it's personal, and it's secure. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.